The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello all, this is Brian for the Breaking Down Security podcast and broadcast. This week, like last week was part one of our discussion with jon-dimaggio. Part 2 is this week. We're going to be continuing our discussion on cyber attacks and his book. He is the author of The Art of Cyber Warfare, an investigator's guide to espionage, ransomware, and organized cybercrime. You can find it on No Starch in PDF and print book, dead tree format, if you will. This week, we continue our discussion with talking about hacking back and, the romanticized idea that we are all capable of, black hat or, doing the exact same things or getting revenge on our attackers by hacking back and sticking it to the bad guys, a la vigilantism or what have you. And we talk about whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea. You'll have to find out. We also talk about, organizations that sell threat intelligence information as a product instead of, openly sharing that. We talk about, some of the ramifications of gating that, that information and making it not available for others to act upon, especially in certain industries that are of a sensitive nature or may not be able to afford that. Some of that shows up again in the part 3 of our podcast that only our Patreon supporters and our Twitch subscribers can listen to, specifically around EduSec and other sensitive and industries that, maybe are not as mature as they could be. So, and finally, I just ask about, what goes through people's minds when they decide they just want to pull down malware and analyze it at home as a private citizen. Because John has done this for years, both as in the public eye, or in public such as it is, but at his job where he worked before he became in the public domain. Here he worked, with government. And now he works in the private sector. That's what I'm looking for. Private sector. That's what I was looking for. And so we talk about the what motivates people to want to analyze malware. As an aside, we do have some training coming up with one of our friends to do some malware analysis. So keep an eye out on our Twitter, which you'll hear at the end of this show, for information on how to join us for those classes, if you will. We're going to be setting up a lab. We're actually going to be analyzing malware on VMs, and, it should be a good time. I plan on joining that just to, build up my lackluster toolkit, if you will. I have not analyzed malware myself, but Tanisha is going to walk us through setting up a lab and analyzing some real malware in VMs and such. So should be a good time. Keep an eye out in our Discord and our Slack and our Twitter for that information. It's supposed to start the end of June 2022. So we'll hopefully make those videos available to Patreon subscribers, Patreon supporters, and Twitch subscribers at certain levels. So looking forward to doing that. So all right, well, I'm gonna let you all get started with part 2 with John, and we'll talk again soon. So you mentioned that us, a private citizen such as myself, hacking back in this case would be considered a felony. Is that because it's being processed under CFAA, or is there another option there? Because we've heard that the CFAA is now being relaxed for good faith kind of research. Could the CFAA be further relaxed if, yours truly was, ransomwaring, Putin's laptop or something like that?
Yeah, well, so what they've relaxed is sort of that bug bounty aspect, but we haven't released we haven't really released a lot of the laws and regulations that would allow a company that's being targeted by a ransomware gang to hack back. They can defend themselves, but we can't hack back. Now it's rare that those prosecuted, but I guarantee you, if there was a big example like a large company got caught doing it, that they would be made an example of by the government. They wouldn't let that go.
Right.
So corporations aren't going to do that or take that chance. And I get it. They shouldn't unless it's legal. But ransomware gangs and even espionage groups would think twice if organizations had really badass teams that could strike back. You would think twice, because right now they know we're not going to do anything. And obviously there would have to be regulation that it can't be the wild, wild west, but it would be nice whether it was something that was regulated or something that was monitored, or you had to get permission to do it or whatever, but something to allow us to progress forward so that we weren't quite as defenseless as we are right now when something happens.
Right. Yeah. My worry about people who want, and in this case, the people who've been hit in their own companies, and companies feel like, well, we should be able to hack back. I don't think that a company who has been ransomwared should be turning their own red team or their own defenders against, trying to hack back against those people. Because I think there's really a lack of, you mentioned in chapter 5 here, analysis and attribution. Unless you have a dedicated team of that, and hopefully the people who are doing that attribution, or doing the IR and gathering those TTPs, are smart enough to go, we shouldn't be doing this because they could hit us back even harder, and you don't want to hit the company and do the hacking where you're at. So
it's a great point. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah,
which is why I said it can't be the wild, wild west. I don't have the solution.
Right.
I just feel like there needs to be something that allows it to be a step further. But yeah, it can't be the wild, wild west. Yeah, I don't have the right formula for that, but I feel like it needs to be more than what it is right now.
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's go to chapter 5, and in this case, you're talking about analysis and attribution. And one of the first things that, if you follow enough people on InfoSec Twitter, they say attribution is hard. Yes. When it first started out, it was, oh well, there's Russian words inside the source code, so obviously I'm not saying it's Russia, but it's really hard because a lot of people want to make those assumptions where I could write code and just go to Google Translate and put in, drink more Ovaltine, and it would come out in whatever Russia is. And I would get people believing it's Russia, even though it might be just little old me. So how is attribution more of a trend thing versus a time and like a singular event? Do you go over a period of time because they'll use the same playbook over and over again? Or is it like a kind of a shoot from the hip kind of thing and hope that you're right?
Well, unfortunately, it's been so. First off, the attribution is near and dear to my heart. That's actually the first chapter that I wrote for this book, because it's something I felt so strongly about, and we don't do a great job of it today. But it's a lot better. But here's the thing: when attribution is done, when you sort of the shooting from the hip scenario, it's usually done incorrectly. And like, there's a story I've got in the book about how one of the Russian intelligence units hacked a Chinese APT group, stole their source code, put some of that code into their own malware to throw investigators off. And when investigators first went in and they saw that unique code that had only been seen with China before, they were quick to blame China, and it actually ended up being Russia. So my point is, that's why in the book I use actual analytical models for both doing like your analysis flow, like how to do your data, how to collect data, how to pivot off of it, how to do analysis, what to do with it once you have it, how to classify that data, how to assess the threat. And I use basically intelligence models that I learned in intelligence analysis school that I then altered to fit my workflow over the years from a cyber aspect that I found to be very effective and efficient. So I included those. So my attribution chapter is definitely opposite of shooting for the hip. It's how to do it in a very scientific and analytical way. And it provides theory and models and different things on how to do attribution. Everything from like time zone analysis to classifying your level of threat, to different attribution models that you can use again, and then just analytical models to go around that when you're doing your day-to-day investigations to help keep you honest, to stop an analyst from making an assumption, because that's where it goes wrong. You can have an analytical theory that's not proven as long as you say that, but then when it comes to the actual your conclusion, when you're writing intelligence report, you need to have the evidence, and that evidence needs to take your conclusion, not what's in your head that you think, because it makes sense it's Russia, or it makes sense it's China, because that's where we end up wrong. And the problem is that once it's wrong, you can never take it back. You can change your PDF or change your website, but it's out there, and other people are going to, even if they just remember it, they're going to base future attribution off of it, and it's snowball effect. It will be wrong. So it's a big problem, and it's something we have not done well in the private sector, and we need to really sort of follow the government's lead on that. And so anyway, that's my sort of hybrid between what I learned in the government and what I found myself dealing with in the private sector. And I just altered that to sort of fit. But yeah, that's what that chapter is about.
Okay. So you mentioned that we may have misattributed certain attacks back earlier, and we're basing some of our future decisions on that. Do you think that we're still doing misattribution, or have we gotten better at it in the past few years, because there's just so much more in terms of TTPs or being able to classify things, or maybe the attribution market and press releases have just gotten more mature and more measured?
Yeah, I think that there's organizations like your CrowdStrikes, your Mandiants, that do a really good job with attribution. And a lot of those organizations have pulled away and hired, folks like myself that used to work for the government, and they're really experienced and they know what they're doing, and they also do attribution through analytical models and analytical theories, and they don't just throw it out there. So there are a handful of companies that are doing it well, and a lot of those companies are sort of leading the way in this space. So while it's slow, I do think we're gravitating towards better attribution, but it really comes down to the individual analyst at different companies, though, having the discipline to just not say and put out there that I think it's X or I think it's Y, and to have, like for leadership and management, to have, a structure and a discipline for how you do attribution and how you classify your threats, and how that information is then used and shared with other elements of your company, because it absolutely affects everything in your investigation if your attribution is wrong. Here's the thing: attribution helps us with profiling, because you can look at the history of a threat group, whether it's a history against your own organization or what they did to different people in maybe in the same industry vertical. But that tells you where to look. That tells us what tools they like to use. That tells us the tactics that they prefer. So you can then dedicate your resources in the right places when you see that you're in the early phases of an attack. When that attribution is wrong, though, often we can do the same thing and put our resources in the wrong places, and then we're playing catch up, and or you just, the bad guys are successful, and you're just screwed at that point.
Right. So I asked the question about, do criminals communicate with one another in the underground about where they're attacking? I don't know if you know this, but do threat companies like the Mandiants and the CrowdStrikes actually coordinate their discussions, so that way they're, Mandiant's coming out and going, well, APT5 is, this, and, CrowdStrikes, no, it's, Lazy Panda or something like that. No, it's a Chinese actor. Do they actually collaborate on those things, or is it just, hey, we're the first ones to market, here's Lazy Panda, go with God or whatever?
So there is coordination, and there's a lot of analytical partnerships and even takedowns against certain threats that'll have multiple security vendors who work together. However, when it comes to attribution, I'm going to call it an 80-20, meaning 80% of it is in line, but then there's 20% that'll be different. So we might have, for example, you might have like a ransomware group that uses their specific ransomware payload, but then let's say they use like Wizard Spider, they use their the Conti and Ryuk guys,
Right.
but they use TrickBot to deliver a lot of their ransomware and to do stuff inside of a network. Well, TrickBot has also been used, with like EvilCorp back when they used to do Dridex attacks and a number of other groups. So in other words, one organization might attribute, this is controlled and developed by Wizard Spider, and another one might say, no, it's a third party, developer broker who, it's not out there for everybody to use, but he selects who can have these resources. So just because you see TrickBot doesn't mean that it's Wizard Spider. So my point is, like, they'll say that the actual attack, like using this payload, was the right actor, but they get a little bit in the weeds and some of the other attributes of an attack, which can lead to misattribution. So again, that's sort of an opinion that, and it's a well-educated opinion, and there's an argument that each of those vendors can make. And at the end of the day, only the attackers probably know the truth. But that's not as bad as when you misattribute a whole, entire attack or a threat or something to the wrong organization or the wrong country. That's more of, getting into the weeds of it, and it's not quite as bad, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Each company is going to have their own threat intelligence feeds that are proprietary to them, and they're not going to be, releasing that secret sauce. But there's been enough that's probably been published out there for an OSINT for the CrowdStrike or Mandiant to go, well, okay, let's double check, and there'll be write-ups and stuff like that. So, yeah, I was just trying to understand that from a layman's point of view here, because it does sound like a lot of these people treat the intelligence as a product, or like, hey, look at what we got here, we're the top dog, we know the things that we're buy our shit. And it's a little it seems like that they're trying to sell that information as a way to invest in their product. So
well, and that's a problem is, and we're not going to get past it, but that is a problem that we are doing it to make a profit at the end of the day. And there's no way that doesn't influence certain aspects. I mean, I think CrowdStrike's really good at what they do, and they have a really cool marketing, plan around their bad guys, and they do illustrations and everything else. And it's really cool. But at the same time, like, that wouldn't happen if it wasn't business driven and there wasn't, dollars behind it to make it cool and trendy. It doesn't mean they don't do a good job, but I'm just saying business definitely influences it. And for example, like when we do a lot of the free reports that companies put out, the stuff that they're not charging for, that's based off of what we think is going to get readers. That's who we're going to think, what's going to draw in customers. So I might have this great intelligence product, and I think it'd be awesome to put out there. But if that's not going to attract the right customers to meet our sales demand for whatever our quota is, we're not going to put that out. We're going to put something else out that may not be as useful, but fits those specific, industry verticals that we're trying to attract customers. So it definitely does have an effect. It's not the overarching or everything end of the day scenario, but it definitely does affect attribution and how what we do publicly and what we release that people read for free.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go down to chapter 7 here. One of the things you had mentioned before we started was that you love the open source tooling out there for various things. And, malware analysis is something that I don't want to say everybody can do, but it is definitely something you can do when you read enough and not infect yourself. There, you can do things like running VMs or what have you. And so there are numerous open source pieces of software out there for analyzing malware. Do you have any favorites, and why do you use them?
So, I'm not a reverse engineer. So one of the things that I try to teach in the book is how to really take advantage of a lot of the resources that are out there for malware analysis and get to, it's not going to be the same level, but near the same end result. And things like, well, there are a lot of commercial repositories and free repositories, or some that have both. Most of them have both models, where you get certain accounts will give you certain resources for free, where others charge. But for example, you could use VirusTotal or hybrid analysis, and you can get a ton of information about malware. But let's say that it doesn't analyze it right. You can download like Cuckoo Sandbox, which is completely open source and free, and is to be honest with you, is my favorite malware resource. And you can run samples on your own and change all the variables and do things to entice the malware to run correctly. And then you get this nice automated report that gives you a lot of the information that you need. So, and then taking those results, that's one of the things, again, that I teach in the book, is how to read those results from those automated reports and what they mean and how to pivot on them to get to the next piece of the attack and then put it all together in the end. But there's also open source tools like the Harvester or Recon NG they're free also, that really help you to collect information, whether it be on infrastructure, whether it be on a username or an email account or even a person's name. And you'd be amazed when once you learn how to use these tools, how much information you can collect. So when you take that and then you take what you get from, again, using some of the dynamic malware reverse engineer malware tools that are out there, you just end up with all of this data. So learning how to take that and make it into intelligence and to know which pieces are important and what they mean and combine all of that, you can really unravel the story of your attacker and what you're looking at. And that's what I try to convey in the book. This is not just my job, it's a passion of mine. Like, I love what I do. So I really wanted to sort of share what I've learned over the years, because it sucks. I'm not smart enough to be a reverse engineer. I suck at math, but I still need to do my job, figure out how to do this stuff. And because it was a hobby first, I didn't have the money to go buy, $5,000 or $8,000 a month for VirusTotal, whatever they charge now. I had to figure this stuff out on my own. So I wanted to share that with people. So people that are interested and want to have a curiosity and want to go do it could go do the same thing that I did.
That's cool. I guess I'm a bit confused why somebody would want to, in private society, want to analyze the malware. I mean, for only, I get it when you have a job and you're working as a SOC analyst or what have you. Is it just the hacking part or the curiosity of how they built the thing in the first place? I mean, what motivated you to do this outside of your job before you got a job? I mean,
yeah.
Is it, there's got to be a skill set or just, I don't know. Please feel free to elucidate.
Yes, it's a puzzle, but it all comes back to finding the human behind it. That's what makes it so interesting. And I'll give you a great example. There was malware out there this was back when it was a hobby. There was malware out there that I found that I had read about. It was used in attack. And I went through and I'm just going through all the strings that are in the malware. And in that, I found this, it was a handle and it was like YYT hack. And it was this guy he put it in all of his malware. Well, I was then using OSINT tool. And so I found that by doing dynamic analysis. Okay. So the low hanging fruit, I wanted to see if there was something unique in there that I could use to pivot on to gain more information about the actual attacker behind it. So finding that, I was able to pivot on that. And I started going through, I got led to some forums that were in Mandarin, but they were like programming and hacker forums. And that sort of looking through that led me to a university. And I found a professor he had an email address that was associated with one of his accounts that was YYT hack. And then I found out that a lot of the Chinese government and military were trained at the same college. Then I also found out the same college sponsored some of their hacking competitions for the military and the government there. So putting it all together just by that one string that I found allowed me to put a human being, his face, his hobbies, profiling him, all of his accounts, his family. I mean, I didn't go put all that out there for people, but I found it all. Like, that is super interesting to me to just take, here's an attack I read about in the news, and now here I am, down the road where I've figured out everything that you could do that, usually you probably would only see in like an intelligence report or something, from the government. And I was able to figure out as a hobby at home. So it was really cool and it's exciting and it's a puzzle and it's fun. So I don't know if that's answers your question, but that's what sort of drove me to do it. And so I think there's a lot of people that get in this field because they have sort of that same interest. I'm super passionate about what I do. And I think that's really what your best analysts are the same. Like they love the work, they love the chase, they love the hunt, they love the puzzle.
Yeah. And I would imagine if you're analyzing it yourself, you can actually follow up with, attribution or, like Krebs, where he's outing people or doxing, oh, this,
Yeah.
this malware, these malware agents or these malware folks for this group are doing whatever, you can work that. I would imagine you want to make sure you're insulating yourself from the world,
Yeah.
create proper OPSEC. The bad guys don't do it very well, but you actually need, you being you, the guy who plans on doing, or plans on doing malware, needs to insulate themselves from the rest of the world.
Yes.
Yeah, proper OPSEC on your end is going to protect you from, reprisal if you decide you want to publish findings or what have you. So,
Can I jump in here real quick? Because you just hit a
sure.
really important point. A lesson that I learned the very, very hard way is you find all that information about a bad guy, you do not go to post that stuff all over the internet. I did that, and I had both threats against my life well, I'm not even going to get into who they were, but then I had the FBI show up at my work. I pissed off everybody.
Yeah.
So the point is that you can talk about a threat, you can do attribution to a certain level, but there's sort of like, I'm going to call it an unwritten code. Like, don't go post people's pictures and their family members and all their social media and everything else.
Yeah.
You don't want that done to you. And like, there's got to be a certain level of, people are going to like I'm saying this, but a certain level of respect to not do that, but you have to do that for your own safety. So you just got to be smart about that.
You're not Brian Krebs. Don't try to be.
Right. Right.
So we have a question from our stream. Digital Warhead, one of our regulars, says, if we're talking about cyber warfare, I have a question. We've heard a lot about both offensive and defensive cyberware with both Russia and Ukraine, but I haven't really heard much about what some of the other major cyber countries, really, Digital Warhead, drink, like the US and Israel, are playing in the cyber war, probably intentionally, but I'm curious if John has any input into what role the US is doing in both helping Ukraine and attacking Russia.
Well, okay. So as far as what we're doing to help the Ukraine, I can talk about because I'm not with the government anymore. And if I was, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But because I'm not, I can tell you from my past experience what I think that we were probably doing. I'm sure we're giving them, intelligence on things that we find. I'm sure we're using some of our resources to help them. But I don't think that we're doing like we did with Iran with the Stuxnet, and you believe whichever version of that you'd like. But most people today believe that the US was behind Stuxnet, where we, put malware into their nuclear power plants to affect their centrifuge systems. And, I don't think we're doing it to that level, but I do believe we're probably using some of our secret squirrel resources to gain intelligence, to give them a heads up that, hey, this is happening, or there's, going to be what we see movement with whether it's troops or missiles or whatever it might be, or, hey, we've got, intercept some communications and there's 5 guys that have been released in Kyiv that are going to be looking for a certain person, whatever it might be. I'm sure we're helping them with aspects like that, but I don't think that we are going in and like trying to shut down command and control systems that Russia is using to launch attacks against the Ukraine. And the reason we're probably not is because they have a nuclear weapon capability. So if they didn't have that, we'd be doing a lot more. Regardless of the administration or your politics, if that wasn't the case, we would be doing a lot more. But because of that, you have to have some boundaries, and it sucks, but you have to have some boundaries, and you got to operate smart. And that's not, I'm not even getting into my opinion what we should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying that's a fact that you have to do that. So I do think we play a role, and I do think we help, and I do think there's stuff that it doesn't hit the news that we do to sort of support their operations in the Ukraine. From an intelligence gathering aspect. But I don't think it's anything like where we're releasing secret squirrel malware to shut down systems and alter the effort of the way the war is going or things like that.
Sure. So we were talking about malware samples. I put about 5 or 6 different links in the stream chat, and I'll put those in the show notes for the audio podcast where you can actually go and get malware samples. Now, don't be stupid. Go to those sites knowing there's real live malware there. You're going to download malware. So don't download it directly to your desktop and open up an exe file. Okay. So you've been warned. Stupid people play stupid games and win stupid prizes. So that's just what you need to know. I've been saying that a lot more recently because there's been a lot of people that have infected themselves. And I think I actually saw that there was a news story about the way they found a ransomware actor was he actually infected himself with his own malware. I'll have to find that story, but yeah, they found him because somebody took control of the C2 and then like went back and was like, oh, we're on the hacker's system. Oh, that's because he's got a Cobalt Strike beacon on his system that he did not know about.
I got a lot. I can't tell them, but I got a lot of stories and that where we've seen that happen with espionage groups that have done exactly that, or they take it home with them to try to use it for criminal purposes to get money for themselves, like the moonlight.
Right.
They infect themselves and screw themselves, and we end up catching on because of that. So it definitely
Yeah.
happens. It's just not always reported.
Not every hacker is a smart hacker, and will own them, get themselves owned. So yeah.
Everybody's going to make a mistake. It's just how big of a mistake you make. So you just got to be really careful so that when you do make that mistake, the damage is minimized.
Yep. Yep. Um, so the last thing I want to talk about before we go, you have Appendix A and B here about threat profile questions and a template. For those people who haven't bought the book yet, including myself, what is in the threat profile questions, and who is that tailored for? Is it tailored for a business or for a person, or what is the end goal of those templates and those questions?
So threat profiles are for security analysts. So here's the purpose of making a threat profile. So it is based off of the behaviors, the personas, the TTPs, that the group's going to use, what tactics that they like, what malware they like, the things that their go-to. As humans, we like to use certain tools and repeat certain things. So you can collect that information, and a threat profile needs to be short, like 1 or 2 pages. But the goal is to be able to give that to your analyst. Remember, 90% of the stuff that they see is not that advanced stuff. So what we want to do is make them familiar enough with some of these advanced threats so that when they see something that's suspicious, a little bell goes off and they're like, huh, that's familiar. What I think I read one of those threat cards or those threat profiles on it. And so they escalate it in time earlier than they would have. It's to minimize the time from when we see something to when we realize it's the beginning of an advanced attack. It's to get a human being comfortable and more knowledgeable about these threats. So they got to be short. I like to equate it to, and this will show my age, when I was a kid, I played with the G.I. Joe toys, and on the back of the box, when you buy one, they'd have a card that told you what guns they used, what their past mission was, who their affiliations were, and that's exactly what a threat profile does. It gives us a human persona and their preferences of their attack preferences that are associated with them. And it's interesting too, when you have sort of like an encyclopedia of bad guys, and each business is going to have different threats that are important to them. So you don't got to focus on everything, but if let's say you're in the energy business, or let's say you're COVID research, like there's going to be specific groups and entities that are known that target those industries. So those are the ones you want to be really familiar with. So it is manageable. It's not like you got to know every single, bad guy group that's out there, but knowing, let's say your top 10 that targets your vertical, it's gonna put you ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's good. And you mentioned COVID research. I mean, that became a huge deal. If biopharmaceutical company was figuring out the next vaccine or what have you, that was not only would the bad guys have that, but they would share it with their own governments, or make it impossible for the company with the leading edge research to do so, or to make headway on that. So that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned TTPs. Is there any specific framework y'all use? Because MITRE has one, has the attack, it has the defend framework, it has the other one that is just, I think, used to sell endpoint security products. But what do you have a specific classification system you use, or do you just use MITRE?
Yeah, MITRE owns that space. I mean, I'm not saying there's no competitors with them, but that's where the industry's gone. Every analyst I know, every company that I work with, every job interview I've been on in the past several 5 years, whatever it's been. I've only been on one job interview in the past 5 years, but you get what I'm saying. Like, everybody uses that attack framework. You go look at job ads, they always have the MITRE attack framework listed. I mean, it's just something that we needed a standard. So they created a good one. it can be a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, as an analyst, but it works and it's effective, and I'm glad that they made it.
Right.
And it was a bigger problem when we didn't have one. So I think that it's a good thing. But yeah, that's sort of the standard. I don't see that changing. What hasn't picked up as much as sort of your sticks and your taxi to sort of communicate that those indicators that are associated with those attacks in a common format. MITRE was behind that too. That has not caught on as well, but the framework for our TTPs and attack behaviors and things like that has absolutely caught on, and that's, again, much needed. So that's a great thing that they put that together, and they did a really good job doing it. And what's the best thing about that is they used the industry to sort of create that. So there's analysts from companies all over the world. When you go look at the credit for a lot of the actual aspects of the framework come from threat research that's published, publicly, where there's some new novel technique that was found that they now adapt into their framework. So it's really cool how they did that and got everybody sort of involved.
That was it for this episode with Jon. You can find us on Twitter at Brakesec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me, Brian Brake, on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned. That's BOETTCHERPWNED. I'm on Mastodon at Brian Brake. And you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other fine podcast purveyors. So hope you enjoy that. You can join our Discord by going to discord.gg/Brakesec. That's our vanity link. And thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and our subscribers on Twitch for helping with our tip jar to, finding value for value and supporting us for things like InfoSec Campout, for instance, which is our conference. It's happening the 26th through the 28th of August. You can check us out at infoseccampout.com. There's a link in our show notes for that. And you can also follow InfoSec Campout on Twitter for announcements. We have tickets available if you want a backyard camping experience. We're not roughing it. And we would appreciate everybody coming, submitting a CFP so you can come and talk. And yeah, it's going to be a great couple days. The August in the Pacific Northwest is a glorious time of year. So hope you can find your way to coming and joining us for that. That's all for Breaking Down Security this week. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. Try to find some empathy. And, as always, take care of yourself, because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.